Today on StampTV, I'm going to show you a clean and simple card project featuring the brand new incentive stamp set duo called Just Because. Let me show you the tools and products you need to make this card project. First, you're going to need some cardstock, and I'm using the Gina K Designs white cardstock, also our black Onyx, and some of our Turquoise Sea. Along with that, I have one of the Fancy Borders vintage cuts in Turquoise Sea. You're also going to need some ink, and I'm going to be using alcohol markers today, so the ink that I'm going to use is the Memento Black. You're also going to need some ribbon, and I have some of the Gina K Designs white Organdy ribbon, and this is the 3/8 of an inch width. For rubber stamps, like I told you earlier, I'm going to use the incentive stamp set duo called Just Because, and look how big this stamp is. In fact, it doesn't fit on the block this way. You have to put it on your block on an angle. That's how big this stamp is, and it's a perfect stamp for this clean and simple look. I'm also going to use the greeting that comes with this that says Just Because. Then you're going to need an extra acrylic block, and you can use either a plain one, or if you have the kind of blocks that have the grid lines, you can use those. Just flip to the side that doesn't have the grid lines for the technique that I'm going to show you. Then I'm going to use two of the Spectrum Noir markers. Now these markers came from these particular 6-packs. First, the yellow 6-pack, these are the yellows. And from this particular collection, I'm using the OR1, and that's an orange, a very, very pale orange. And then from the reds collection, I'm going to be using CR8, and that's a nice, vibrant jewel tone red. I'm also going to use a Sakura Clear Star Stardust pen. You can also use the Wink of Stella pen if you have that, or you can use some Stickles glitter glue or even fine glitter. You're also going to need some scissors, and I'm using the cutter bees, and I have some adhesive. So let's start with this piece of Gina K Designs white cardstock and the large flower image. I'm going to ink up this image using this Tuxedo Black ink, and then I'm going to stamp it right close, very close to the left-hand side, like that. Then I'm going to stamp it a second time, but I'm going to stamp it so that the flowers are a little bit shorter. So I'll stamp it right about here, and I'm going to angle it just a little bit, like that. Now, I want to add my greeting right now before I start coloring. Just in case I don't get it right, I'll have a chance to flip the piece of cardstock around and restamp my flowers and greeting. I don't want to go through all the work of coloring the flowers only to mess up the greeting. So now I'm going to pull this in just a little bit, and excuse my head if it gets in the way. But I'm going to stamp this right about here. There we go. And that's just perfect. Okay, the next step is going to be to color. Now, I had told you a little bit earlier that you need to get an acrylic block and just use the smooth side of the block. And I'm going to color blend these two colors together, the OR1 and the CR8. I'm going to start by using the lighter color, which is the OR1, and of course I'm using the bullet tip because this is a very delicate image. So I'm going to start just by coloring in the inside petal of this orange flower. And I'm going to do a few at a time. The people at Spectrum Noir recommend that you do your blending in little bits at a time. So you would blend 3 or 4 flowers and then move on to the next 3 or 4 flowers, rather than doing all one color and then going back and doing all another color. Okay, so now I have those petals colored, and I'm going to grab that acrylic block and the chisel end of the CR8, and I'm going to dab some of that red right onto the acrylic block. Now, using the OR1 the orange, I'm going to pick up a little bit of that red and I'm going to dab it right at the top of each of those petals. And as I'm dabbing that, some of the orange is also coming off the marker, and that is creating a nice blend all by itself. See that? How pretty that looks? And I'm going to keep doing that. And you can reload your marker with the red. And don't worry, this won't affect the orange marker. You can just scribble off the little bit of red that's on the tip of this marker, and it will not affect the marker long term. Do the same thing here. I'm just dabbing that red, and as I dab, the orange flows out too, and it just kind of all blends together. On an image this tiny, this is a really great way to do this kind of blending. It doesn't really take much to blend these two colors together, but you do have to keep reloading because eventually it just all goes away and the orange is back. So you do need to keep loading a little bit of that red on there. And if it doesn't look vibrant enough, just keep adding a little bit more. Okay. So there's the first three. Now I would recommend that you take a little piece of paper, any kind of paper, here I have a little post-it note, and just scribble your marker to remove any of the red that might still be on that tip. Now you can go back and do a few more in the orange. And even with a tiny little image like this, the Spectrum Noir markers with these little bullet tips make it so easy to get a really neat shaded effect. Alright, now I'm going to pick up some more red and add that in there. Do a couple more, and then I think I'm going to have to get some more red off of that marker. And you can see as I go around the petals, the red gets less and less. Okay, I'm going to dab a little bit more red onto this block. Pick some of that up. You can do this technique with Copic markers too, or any of the markers that are alcohol markers. So this is not just limited to this type of marker or this brand of marker. This technique will work well for any alcohol markers. Okay, I'm going to scribble off again and then finish up these last three. This is so fun and so easy to do, and when you see the flowers in person, you're going to be so impressed with yourself. Even though it's easy to do, it really, really looks pro. And you'll find that that red ink will dry a little bit on the block, but as soon as you hit it with the orange marker, it reactivates and it gets wet again and you can pick it up. So and one more. And then as that starts to dry, it really blends together nicely. Just looks so soft. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little bit more to that first one. I think it was a little bit light-handed on that one. There we go. So now those flowers are all blended together. And I'm going to finish by cleaning off the rest of that red that was on that marker. And now my markers can be put away. A lot of you have asked how to store the Spectrum Noir markers, and they recommend storing them on their sides so that the ink flows evenly between the two tips. Okay, so now my next step is going to be to assemble this card. I'm going to grab that piece of black Onyx cardstock and adhere these two pieces together using some of the mono adhesive. And you can see that the alcohol markers, the Spectrum Noir markers, do bleed through unless you're using the Gina K Designs heavy base weight cardstock. Then you won't get any bleeding at all. So if you want to do a single layer card and you don't want to have all these layers, but you want this same look, just use our heavy base weight and nothing will bleed through. Okay, so now I've added that panel on, and now I'm going to use this vintage cut border. This is one of the fancy borders, and I'm going to add that right over that seam, like that. So I can do that just by adhering, adding a little bit of adhesive, and then I want it to be even on both sides, so I have to kind of move it back and forth until it looks like this edge is hitting the same spot on that swirl, that loopy, flowery thing, as it is on this side. So that looks pretty good. So I will tack that down. And then, using my Cutter Bee scissors, I'm going to remove the excess, like that. And that's pretty easy to do. Just get your scissors right up against the cardstock and use that as your guide. There we go. And if you get a little bit of black in there, that's okay. Okay, so now I'm going to add some ribbon to that. And I want the ribbon to look like it's split in half. So half of it is turquoise and half of it is white. So that's where I'm going to place it when I tack it down. And I'm going to do that with some of the mono adhesive. So get a little bit on the back there. And then position that where I want it. It's kind of a fun look. And the white edge of the organdy ribbon is right up against the where those loops start, so you don't see that. So there is the ribbon. And now this whole panel is going to go on top of my Turquoise Sea Card Base. And you know, whenever I put ribbon on, I always add a little bit of extra tape over the ribbon so it doesn't peel up. Just secures it a little bit better. And now I want to add a little bit of sparkle to this card. And like I said, you may have the Wink of Stella pens, or you might have some Stickles glitter glue, or even loose glitter. I'm going to use the Sakura Clear Star Stardust pen. And I'm just going to touch it right into the center of each one of these flowers. So it's not going to be very dramatic, but when the recipient of this card opens it up and they move the card side to side, they'll just see that tiny little bit of sparkle. And then you just need to give that a minute to dry, and that will be ready to mail. It's a nice flat card for mailing too. So there is my finished card project. For those of you who've been waiting to try the Spectrum Noir markers, we now carry the entire marker collection and the new Spectrum Noir blendable pencils in our online store at www.ginakdesigns.com.